I think it's time for a reading wrap-up. Welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to be here and to be talking about all of the books that I read in October and November. I didn't get a chance to film this in October, so I thought I'd do a combined one, and it has turned out to be quite a lot of books. I have my cute little Christmas tree behind me with my bows, and I'm just absolutely in love with it. And then I made like a little makeshift bookcase with some of my TBR books that I'm hoping to get to by the end of the year. Quite a few books to talk about today, so grab a drink and settle in because it might be a long one. I'm gonna go in order of what I read from the start of October all the way through to November. The first book I read in October was Woven in Midnight. This book is by Isabel Ibáñez, and she has written a bunch of other books, all fantasy, a lot of them more folk fantasy or cultural fantasy, and I really like her writing. All of her books are YA and really easy to sink your teeth into and to just kind of binge, which I like. They are also a bit more in depth though, so I find them a lot more entertaining and they stay with me a bit longer. It's really good. I really liked it. It was kind of unconventional. It's essentially about a woman who is a decoy for a princess, and through a crazy string of events, she's kind of forced to marry this really awful king who has displaced all of her people in place of the princess. So the king thinks that he's marrying the princess, but really he's marrying the decoy. There's a bit of like enemies to lovers. She's very fierce. It's very female energy, warrior, really strong characters. I really liked it, and there is a second book. I'm undecided if I want to continue the series, but I am gonna think on it because I did really enjoy it. It's just that I'm reading so many series, I don't really know where I land with like continuing ones that aren't 5-star reads. But yeah, I'll think on that. I rated this one a 4 stars. It was really good. Next book of the month, I don't actually have a physical copy for, and that was A Photo Finish by Elsie Silver. This is Violet Eaton's love story, and Violet Eaton is the sister to all of the brothers in the Chestnut Springs series. It was very cute, a very interesting read, and I think it was very different from the Chestnut Springs series. What I liked about it was in the first book in this other series, I'll put the title up here because I can't recall it, Violet comes off as really shy and silent and very meek, but in this book we see her as a lot more like feisty, and I liked the love interest. It was very much like grumpy meets sunshine, a big age gap, and then also like wounded soldier, which I haven't read any books like that except for Bo Eaton's book in the Chestnut Springs series. It was really good. I did enjoy it. I gave it a 4.5 star, and I think that's only because Elsie Silver in this series, I don't think her writing was as developed as in the Chestnut Springs series, but I'm saying that as someone who has never written a book. It's just my opinion as a reader, but I did really enjoy it and I would recommend it. I am gonna continue the series, and I actually have the next one here, which I just got from the library. I have them on my Kindle as well, but I've just really been enjoying hard copy books lately. So this is actually probably going to be my next read. So yeah, I'm very much loving the series. Okay, the next book, this has been on my TBR since January, and I kind of bought it when I got back into reading and kind of was like following TikTok and YouTube and things a bit more because everyone kind of loved it. It was not at all what I expected, and I know it's super unpopular opinion, but I actually really did not like this book. I read about half and then I listened to the audiobook, and it was so close to being a DNF for me. It's about two friends who I guess kind of come together at a young age over really horrible things. You know, Sadie, the female main character, her sister is sick in hospital, and then Sam, the male main character, he's sick in hospital. So they're kind of surrounded by all of this pain, and they become friends that way. And then they rekindle their friendship when they're at university, and they end up building a computer gaming business together. And the whole book just details their friendship throughout the years. It's very well written, and I think the story has a lot of value to it, and people could read it and get a lot out of it. I just felt that parts of it unnecessary, in that I felt like the author, Gabrielle Zevin, really wanted me to dislike the two main characters, and the fact that I didn't like them kind of made me not want to read the book because there was no one to root for. They both go through periods where they are really, you know, not someone that I would want to be associated with, not someone that I'm rooting for in the book. But then they also go through like periods of growth. But as the book finished, I didn't feel like they learnt anything. Like, it was just very much talking on their lives. Like, it wasn't, I don't think there was a moral of the story or anything like that. And not all books have to have that, but the kind of story that they set up at the start, I thought that there was going to be like an evolution of them growing, but I just didn't really feel that that was the case. But yeah, I gave it a 2.5 stars. I know so many people that love this book. I just have not really been enjoying like lit fiction lately, so I think that that also contributes. The book I read, I really, really liked. It was Dial A for Auntie. I picked this up at the library because I actually saw like another booktuber reading it, and it just looked really fun. I think this is probably one of the most like outrageous stories that I have read this year. It follows a woman through this really ridiculous rom-com and series of events where someone dies and they try to hide the body and they don't really know what's gonna happen. Like, it's very much, it's just hilarious. Like, I just really, really liked it, and it was a very fun read, and I would recommend. There were so many like plot holes, but I think it didn't really matter because the point of the story was like this crazy ensemble of characters all coming together for this really wild array of events. And it is a romantic comedy. There was a romantic aspect, which was really sweet. And it was interesting because I kind of felt like the third act miscommunication trope, which so many romance books have, was kind of at the start. Like, that was like what foreshadowed the romance. The two main characters actually had dated previously and then broken up, so it was a second chance romance. But yeah, it was really cute. I did really like it, and I would recommend it. I gave it a 4 stars. It wasn't quite a 5-star read, but I would read, I think, anything else that that author put out. Like, I think she would almost be an auto buy for me. Like, I really, really liked it. The next book I read, it was like a bit out of pocket for me, Red River Road by Anna Downs. She is not Australian, but she's an Australian author. And this is a thriller set in Australia. It's about a woman who does kind of like a solo van life trip, and she's looking for her sister who was doing the same thing and went missing. I don't really want to say too much about the plot because it's a thriller, and I don't really read books like this. They kind of spook me out a little bit, and I did get scared at one part, but it was a fun binge read. I don't think I would recommend it, but if anyone is into like Australian-esque books with, you know, it was very beautiful depiction of like Western Australian life, you know, beautiful scenery and things like that. It was nice, and the characters were interesting, but I did think there was a lot of plot holes. Beyond like a fun binge read over a really rainy weekend or when you're on the beach, probably wouldn't read again. I'm probably going to donate it, but I'm glad I did read it because it's good to diversify what you're reading. But I gave it a 3-star. But yeah, not my like favorite book of the month, but I'm glad I read it. Okay, the next one was The Serpents and the Wings of the Night. I had this on Kindle through Kindle Unlimited, and I ended up listening to the audiobook because I got it for free through Audible. and I really liked it. I binged it. It just was such a good fantasy book. There's everything that like a fantasy girly would want. You know, there's vampires, there's forbidden love, there's enemies to lovers. It was so good. It was so easy to just like sink my teeth into, pun intended. I really, really liked it. I want to talk about the plot, but I literally have so many books to go through, like I think I'm gonna have to kind of hold back. But yes, it was very good. I think my favorite thing about the book was the love story that develops, like much romantasy-esque vibes, and there's a twist at the end which I really liked, and I am going to continue this series. I think I'm probably not going to buy them though. I might just listen to the audiobooks because it was that good. Like I just really, really like the audiobooks. So yeah, I ended up giving that a 4-star as well. Like not quite a 5-star, but really, really good. Love, love, love. Would recommend. The next book I read was my favorite book of the month and the only 5-star of the month, and that was Daydream by Hannah Grace. I was so excited to read this book way back last year when I started seriously getting back into reading. Icebreaker and Wildfire were like some of the books I had saved and I really wanted to read, and then I went to the library and I got Wildfire and I read that, and I kind of, you know, found a love for romance books that I'd never had before. This book I just found so relatable. Like the characters in this book, Hallie, she's a book girly, she runs a book club, you know, she's eldest daughter, people pleaser, always doing everything for everyone else and never really herself. I found that relatable to some extent, like not in all aspects, but I think there was a lot about her that was really relatable. And then Henry is kind of shoved into this position to be the captain of the team, and he doesn't want to. He finds it really overwhelming, and you know, there's things that he struggles with that Hallie can help him with. And they kind of create like this beautiful friendship that then blossoms into love, and I just loved everything about it. I absolutely ate it up. I definitely will be rereading this. Obsessed. I really, really liked it. I cannot say it enough. Like, I think out of the series, this is probably my favorite, and yeah, obsessed. 5 stars. 5 stars. Anyone who's like thinking of reading this series, I think they should start with this book. That's my opinion. Yeah. And then these ones I'm not really gonna like talk on too much because I did do a separate vlog, but I read Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight, the first 2 books in the Throne of Glass series. I really like both of them. I did do like a reading vlog with them and like way more in-depth thoughts, but I rated them both 4 stars. I am really liking this series, and one of my goals for the end of the year is to finish the series. So watch this space because there will be more Throne of Glass content. But yes, really, really liked it. Highly recommend. My very beautiful friend Katie lent me her copies of like the original covers, which are very cool. But yeah, both 4 stars. I also don't have this book because I've returned it to the library, but my last read of October was Wrecked by Lauren Asher. I've been working my way through the Dirty Air series. Wrecked follows Jax, who is friends with the other main characters from the previous 2 books. I enjoyed this, but I didn't enjoy it as much as the first 2 books. I really thought I was gonna love this. Like everyone raves about it and says it's their favorite book of this series, but like I didn't love it. Like I think, to be honest, it was just kind of like mid. Like it was a mid romance book. It's probably my least favorite Lauren Asher book I've ever read. I love her writing. I don't know what it was about this, but it just didn't quite hit. Give it 3 stars. And I think this series is worth reading. So I think it's worth reading in that regard, and I would recommend it. But out of the books I've read in the series so far, it's just not my favorite. And heading into November, I have like quite a varied reads for the month. But my first read was Orbital. This book actually just won the Booker Prize, and it's tiny. It's like 150 pages. Less. It's 130 pages. This is nothing like any other book I've read this year. I tend to consume like feel-good content books and things that aren't too deep, just because in my day job I do a lot of serious reading and I just want to read something fun and light in my spare time. This book is not super heavy, but it's very beautifully written. It's almost like poetry, and it follows 6 astronauts, like women and men, who are in space throughout one day. And it kind of talks about things that are happening on Earth and then also things that are happening in the space station where they are. And it was just beautiful. Like I think I finished it maybe on the 2nd of November, really early in the month. And now we're in December and I'm still thinking about it. It's, I'm gonna say, probably the best written book I've read this year, and I will definitely be rereading it. I think my main takeaway from it is humanity, and like how humanity doesn't really have anything to do with where you are or what your nationality is or your race. It's about who you're with, and you don't necessarily need to be with a large group of people or a part of a large community to have that. There's also a really big focus on like the separations and physical lines we draw in our lives that separate us rather than like collectively doing things together. But yeah, it's really beautiful, and I would recommend, even if you're kind of like a fantasy and romance book reader, I think if you were gonna step out of your comfort zone and read something a little bit more serious, this is a really good place to start, because it is very short and it's very well written and just immaculate. I think that would be how I would sum this book up. I would say it's immaculate. I gave this a 5-star, and I don't even think ratings really explain books like this. Like, it's so much more personal than that and just so different to anything else on my bookshelf. Again, not gonna talk about this too much, but the next book I read was The Assassin's Blade. I also read Air of Fire, which I'm gonna like do a little reading vlog of that when I've read a few more in the series. But yeah, I'm really enjoying this series. I don't have like that much to say about them because it's all covered in another video, but yeah, loving, would highly recommend. I gave The Assassin's Blade a 4 stars, and I think this was the first book in this series where I started to feel like closer to Selena and like really resonate with her as a character. I'm glad I didn't read it first. I'm glad I read it after I had read Crown of Midnight and Throne of Glass. And then Air of Fire, easily my favorite book in the series so far. I gave it a 5 stars. I like devoured it. I read it in a day or two. Just obsessed. Obsessed. Highly recommend. After I finished that, I ended up borrowing The Selection as an audiobook from Libby. And I really liked it. I just kind of listened to it while I commuted to work. It was very non-offensive. It is about a girl called America who lives in what was America in a dystopian future, and there's kind of a caste system similar to, I would say, like kind of like Hunger Games, where people are separated and numbered. So, you know, like the lower you are in the number, the worse your life is. I guess it's similar in that aspect. Anyway, she gets selected to be part of a group of women who are chosen to maybe become the prince's bride. It's cute, it's sweet, it's very like YA. I don't know if I'll continue the series, but it was really nice to read and kind of uplifting. I gave The Selection 4 stars. It was just exactly what I wanted at that time. The next book I read was The Enchanto's Daughter. I got this from the library when I was kind of looking for like more Halloween books. It's, you know, a pretty basic fantasy story. It's about a girl who was hiding in the human world, but she's actually the daughter of a king. She basically goes back because he's died, and she is going to become queen. And she kind of like goes into this like school system, and she's like going to be the queen, but she has to learn everything about the place. And there's like a little bit of romance and there's a mystery. It was very cute and nice, but I gave it three stars. It was like a nice random read for me. Sometimes I like to just go to the library and like pick up a book off a shelf and see, because I find that the same books repeatedly get recommended online, so it's nice to just kind of like see what else is out there. So the next book, which was also on my November TBR, was One Dark Window. I had to return it to the library because someone else had it on hold, but I did read it. I did like it. I do think it's a little bit overhyped online, but it was a really good book. I'm not gonna, I guess, kind of talk on the story because I think it is like, people kind of talk about it all the time, but it's kind of like a dark fantasy, and I guess the premise of it is that the magic system is a little bit different. Instead of people having magic inherently inside them, they get magic through like these playing cards, and when you touch the card, then you can use the magical ability that's within the card. And our main character, she had like an illness when she was little that was illegal. Like if you had that, you had to be killed, and no one found out that she had it. She was kind of hidden, and because of that, she has her own magical abilities. I enjoyed it. I don't think it was worth the hype. I'm glad I read it. Maybe my thoughts would change in a few weeks, but at the moment that's kind of like where I stand with it. Yeah, I gave that one a 3-star. The next book I read, I bought this in January. This is an Australian author, and the book is Chai Times at Cinnamon Gardens. I actually don't have the words to describe this book. Like, I bought it because the synopsis made it sound like a really quaint, nice read. The synopsis on the back basically says like, oh, this is a book about a nursing home in Western Sydney, and the residents, like, they're from all these different places in the world, and it's about the stories they share and the community that they build. The book is about that, but it is about so much more than that. It is about racism in Australia. It is about multiculturalism. It's about what it means to be Australian. I loved it. Like, I couldn't put it down, and then maybe the last 100 pages, like, I just sobbed. It feels so relevant to read a book like this, and I feel like when we're living in a time where there's so much divide and people have such strong opinions, it was really refreshing to read a book from someone else's perspective who kind of like held space and had the grace to think about how other people perceive things. I think this is probably like that, this and Orbital are like, they stayed with me, and I understand why people love literary fiction so much when I read books like this, because it is so powerful. Yeah, I gave this a 5-star, and you know, in a similar way to Orbital by Samantha Harvey, I don't think that a rating can be had on a book like this, because the story that is being told is, it's fiction, but it's also not fiction. It's so personal and has such strong meaning. So yeah, I gave it 5 stars, but I think it's more just like, I love it. So the next book that I read was A Fate of Wrath and Flame by K.A. Tucker. This was really fun. I really, really like this book. It is about a jewel thief in New York City, like current time, and her name's Romeria. And through like a really strange series of events, she wakes up in the body of like an elvish princess. And it's this crazy like enemies to lovers. Is there a war? Is there not a war? Like plots, mystery. It's just everything you'd want out of a romance book. It was so good. I really, really like it. I'd highly recommend it. I haven't really seen many people talk about it, and I think they should, because this was excellent. It was a really, really good book. It was a great read, and I feel excited that I saw it at the library and I picked it up, because I wouldn't have read it otherwise. I forgot to say, but I gave this a 4.5 stars. It was really good. Okay, the next book I read was A Wicked Magic by Sasha Lawrence. This is like a YA witchy mystery kind of book. It's about 2 teenagers who accidentally make themselves into witches, and they're trying to solve the mystery of one of their friends who go missing. Kind of something goes awry and their friend goes missing, and they're trying to solve the mystery of that. That's the plot of the book, but it's not really about that. It's, I think, more about like mental health and growing up And there's also really strong themes of friendship, belonging. I think it was a really beautiful book, and there are some heavier themes, so like definitely check the trigger warnings. There's like trigger warnings at the start of the book about self-harm and suicide and things like that, but I kind of wish that I had read more books like this when I was a teenager, because I think it's important to read stories about heavier subjects so that maybe you know how to handle them if they come up in your own life, or people you know bring them up to you. But yeah, it was really, really good. It wasn't what I was expecting. It was much heavier than kind of like a light witchy novel. It was a good story, and I'm glad that I read it, but not a fun read. I rated this 3 stars. Okay. The next book I got was like recommended to me by the person that works at the bookshop, and I got it secondhand. There's like a really great secondhand section in my bookshop, my local bookshop. And this is a really fun story. It's like magical realism. I hope that's the right term. It's like ordinary world, but magic exists. So it's basically about this man who's a caseworker. His name is Linus, and his job is to go to orphanages where magical children are to make sure that it's safe for them and they can be there. And he gets sent to this house in the Corellian Sea where the Antichrist is. Just kind of like, it's fun and a little bit ridiculous, but I also really liked it. All of the characters are like really enchanting and lovable, and I just wanted to keep reading because I wanted to know what the characters were about. Like, it was very character driven rather than plot driven, but I really liked it. I also liked the growth that this book showed, and then it also just had some like beautiful messages in it, which yeah, I really liked it. I gave this one a 4-star, and I would recommend it, and I would read it again, I think, in the future. Okay, last 2 books. So the second to last book I read was One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus. This book I've seen a lot of places. It's a YA thriller. It's like a murder mystery. So 5 teenagers that get sent to detention, and during detention one of them dies. It's kind of got like The Breakfast Club vibes if someone died. But yeah, it's good. I liked the way it was written. Like, it's written from all 4 teenagers' perspective, and they've all got personal things happening in their life, and they're kind of like intertwined. Yeah, I would say this book is a crossover between like The Breakfast Club and Gossip Girl. That's the energy it gives. I liked it. It's not my favorite thriller or like mystery book I read. If someone asked me for a recommendation for a YA mystery, I would probably suggest like A Good Girl's Guide to Murder over this, but it was good and it was very entertaining. I gave it 3 stars, I think, just because maybe when I read it I wasn't like craving a book like this, but I did enjoy it overall. The last book I read has been on my TBR for a very long time, and I don't actually own it. It's one of my friends, and I very much need to give it back to her, and that is The Right to Sex. This is a non-fiction, essentially an essay about the right to sex. It's a feminist book, and it talks about women's rights to their body, how the internet has played a part of that, how social norms have played a part of that, who has a right to sex, who has a right to their own body, you know, how a lot of things have really impacted people. I know I'm being very vague. I think a little bit more trigger heavy than a lot of the other books I've read, but I wanted to give it a go, and I'm glad I did. I reflected on a lot, and it's important for everyone to read, not just women. And I haven't seen like a lot of people talk about this. It came out in 2021, and when I was like looking things up about it, I saw a lot of people talk about it at the time, but not really since. But I think it's really important for people to read books like this, and it's not very long. It's only about 250 pages. I'm not going to rate this one because it's a non-fiction, but I did like it. Good book. That is all of the books I read in November and October. I had a very good 2 months of reading overall. 22 books I read over 2 months. I had 4 or 5 stars, which is pretty good. I think in December I'm going to try and read some more Christmassy reads. I'm currently reading The Celebration, which by Erin Sterling, which is the third book in the X-Hex series, which I'm really liking. It's like Christmassy, but not too Christmassy, so I feel like you could kind of read it any time of the year. That's all from me today. Thank you for watching. If any of you have read any of these books and you like them as well, or you had different opinions, please let me know. And yeah.